Hello and welcome to the LLG blog. I am Helen McGrath, Executive Director of Policy and Governance, and I am joined by our Bulletin Editor, Dennis Hall.
Hello, everyone.
Now, a happy new year to all our members. Many changes are going to lie ahead this year. It's an election year locally and probably nationally, with hot rumours of an autumn general election. But Dennis, what's caught your attention over the festive period and into the new year?
Well, Helen, we explore today an important and emerging issue for statutory officers and also in-house legal professionals. 2023 saw a monitoring officer being referred to the SRA by their counsel. And the latest similar case involving the now bankrupt Thurrock Council involves a chief finance officer also being investigated by their regulatory body. So the question, I think, is this: is there likely to be a new trend to involve regulatory bodies in questioning the role of statutory officers? And what are the implications of this? And of course, this focus will continue during 2024 as the Post Office scandal inquiry unpicks the role of in-house lawyers to determine precisely what went wrong in a large public organisation over many years in what has become the greatest legal scandal ever. So, another question: how do we see ourselves in local government? Are we as lawyers mere bystanders, required only to simply take instructions from others who are taking the big decisions? Or should our professional curiosity lead us to be more questioning and more assertive, and especially where our legal duties come into play? Should we now expect more attention from those regulators? And many are asking the question too: does the series of Section 114 cases involve professional regulatory failings? So the role of in-house lawyers is now under scrutiny like never before. And this morning, our vlog will look at these issues, Helen.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Legal Services Board and the SRA have been alive to this issue for a while in regards to the rule of law and ethics and the role of the in-house lawyer. But I think, you know, what the sector really needs is far more professional support. So what we need really is actual guidance and proper documentation that can be held up. I think the in-house sector, that is, not so much local government, because local government, I think, can be distinguished. I think there is subtle differences between the in-house sector and the local government in-house sector, in the sense that we are far more in tune to the political nuances. That doesn't mean there aren't pressures within our sector, but I think in the in-house sector, it's far more, because it's corporate and because there's a real business interest to it. I think the pressures can be a lot more elevated. But this whole question of individual accountability, I think, is going to dominate this year, Dennis. If you look at the Post Office scandal and the inquiry, you'll see, and we've reported on it previously, that there were attempts by an external legal provider to force or certainly to recommend to the Post Office that at least 2 of their in-house lawyers be referred to the SRA, and that was a few years ago. That doesn't seem to have happened. I think it's good that the ITV have picked up the inquiry, well, the circumstances with the Mr. Bates against the Post Office, but I would question whether or not government would be taking as much of a public interest in the way it is. And I understand ministers are meeting this morning, actually, to discuss what it is they might do in respect to the convictions. But the fact that that's happened, and actually, if we look at the Mirror Group as well, and the action that's been taken in relation to phone tapping and listening to messages, there's the suggestion is that the in-house lawyer there also would have been aware that that was occurring.
Well, it's an interesting one, that, because the report last week, I think it was on the 5th of January, was about this judgment by Mr. Justice Fancourt in the Prince Harry phone tapping case. And Marcus Partington, who's the lawyer in question, who's no longer with Mirror Group, he was referred to repeatedly in the judgment of Mr. Justice Fancourt. And what he appears to have done wrong is that he has been no more than just aware of the unlawful information gathering. He wasn't. There's no suggestion he was involved in it, and this was over a long period from 1999 onwards. And he is now going to be. He has been referred to the Solicitors Regulation Authority, and what that case in particular, and the Thurrock one, and the Monitoring Office one, which we reported on, was the case in Tainbridge that you remember early last year, although in fact the SRA didn't in the end carry out an investigation. Why I flagged this up, Helen, in our discussions is I think there might be a shift from looking at corporate responsibility to looking at the individual responsibility of professional officers. So the two key examples that I'm citing here, the Tainbridge one, which was a monitoring officer, and Thurrock, which is the chief finance officer, might suggest there's a shift towards looking at individual responsibility. And my concern is what is the position with monitoring officers, for example? If you just look at them, they have an employment status, and I wonder whether that needs to be reviewed. Why are we sure that monitoring officers feel free to act and advise appropriately when things are going wrong? And I think the question in 2024 will be, what would be the right regulatory environment to encourage monitoring officers to act appropriately in cases of difficulty? That seems to me to be the central theme here.
Well, I mean, the first thing that could happen is the government could make good on its promise to enhance the statutory protections for monitoring officers, which it hasn't done, although it committed to it following its response to the Committee on Standards in Public Life's ethical review. But how many years are we going back now? I mean, that must be 6-7 years old now. So
indeed, it's not on their radar, is it?
Not at all. But what concerns me, and we need to be careful what we say about the Tainbridge case, because I don't know what's happening there. But yes, the SRA have not followed through. Obviously, there was a complaint made. Obviously, complaints can be made anywhere, but the fact that a complaint was made against the monitoring officer to their professional body, I think that can be damaging in and of itself to a person's career, regardless of whether or not any action is taken as a result of it. And I do think that it's quite concerning that not only now, it seems, do monitoring officers potentially have to concern themselves with the employment law and the minimal protections that are around that in relation to determining their employment status, they also now have to concern themselves about their professional obligations. Now, that's not to say that in cases of, negligence or dereliction of duty and the extreme, that, actually there are professional standards and we need to hold ourselves to account to those.
Of course, yes.
It will be interesting to see what the findings are in relation to the Thurrock 151 officer. And I know there were rumours previously as well about potentially the London Borough of Croydon, the officers there at the time, whether or not action would be taken against them. But I don't think that's...
Okay. The concern I have for monitoring officers is that they appear to be in a position of triple jeopardy. They face potential, if they do the right thing, they may still be subject to potential action from their employer. We now have the possibility of the SRA taking a more proactive attitude into looking at individual responsibility, which they're perfectly entitled to do. And then there are those cases where, and this has happened in the past, monitoring officers might be named and criticised in a formal report, say, from the local government ombudsman. And this was the thing in the Tainbridge case that led to the special meeting of the council. I think we're looking beyond the question of indemnities and statutory protection. I feel that the monitoring officer and the Section 151 officer should have a special immunity from any kind of action in circumstances where they're doing no more than their proper job in putting things back on the rails.
Yeah. Well, certainly professionals need to be enabled to do their job and protected if they do their job. We've spoken at length previously about career suicide, standing up for what's right.
Yeah.
And there does need to be the whole system needs to be examined, actually, in order to prevent what we're seeing as consistent governance failures within local authorities.
The post office scandal has put the spotlight on all of this, and I'm sure that 2024 will see some exploration of the regulatory regime that governs in-house lawyers.
Yeah.
And we need to be looking to see that we create the right environment so that the key officers, such as the monitoring officer and the 151 officer, are able to act appropriately when they should be doing.
Well, the other really important thing here is at a time where we're really struggling with recruitment and retention within the sector, if there's going to be personal and individual liability to individuals, whether they are just doing their job, and again, I stress here, we're not talking about negligent behaviour in a professional role, but it hardly induces people to want to wed themselves to that kind of risk in their career when they could definitely take a less contentious career pathway with more certainty. So I think that's a real concern for the sector as well. But plenty to think about, Dennis, and listeners can be sure that we'll be there to guide them through the detail in both the bulletin and the Grapevine podcast throughout the year. So on that note, you can get coverage of many more items from the bulletin by listening to the Grapevine podcast. So it's goodbye from me.
And from me too. Bye now.
Bye-bye.